I will now introduce our next speaker, Emmanuel Detournay. Emmanuel and I have our lives have intertwined over the years. Often we've been in the same building, but at different times. So Emmanuel is currently the Theodore W. Bennett Professor in Mining Engineering and Rock Mechanics in the Department of Civil, Environmental and Geoengineering at the University of Minnesota. He worked with Anthony in the 1980s on geomechanics. He worked in Schlumberger. He worked in this lab here in Cambridge. Emmanuel, like Anthony, has a really diverse career which spans both academia and industry. In 2016, he was elected to the US National Academy of Engineering. Today, Emmanuel will talk about multiscale asymptotics for hydraulic fracturing. So over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for the kind words. Hello, Anthony. Hello, everyone. So let me just say I'm delighted to be here. Sorry, yes, you are hearing me, huh? Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, delighted to be here because I've had the long association with Anthony, having started in 1985 when I joined Schlumberger. Actually, it was Noel Schlumberger in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Anthony would appear regularly for the review session and being the chief prosecutor at those sessions. So I've known him well for over all those years. Anyway, I also want to thank you at this stage, all the organizers. I mean, it's really an honor to be part of this celebration. So let me share my screen. So what I'm going to talk to today is a multi-scale tip asymptotics in hydraulic fracturing. What I want to tell, the underlying story that I want to tell is the fact that something that starts in Cambridge in the early 1990s with Anthony as in a central role, I mean, developed into a full-fledged research which is still going on today. So that's really what I want to tell, and I kind of summarize maybe kind of 25 years, 30 years of research in about half an hour. So for those of you who are not in hydraulic fracturing, let me just give you a quick review of what it is. So it is injecting fluid in a rock mass to create a fracture or multiple fracture. But let's look at the simple case where we have here a planar fracture. So the equation there are two main equations here. One is the elasticity, which you can see from here written in the form of an integral equation, which link the pressure, the fluid pressure to the opening via hypersingular integral equation, which use the dislocation dipole from elasticity. And then we have a lubrication equation. It's not a complete, there's no link off here, but as has been said already, it is strongly nonlinear because of the W cube here. And we have boundary condition, as Anthony would know, would tell us. And here it's a kind of a more general case where we have two fronts. We have the fluid front, which is distinct from the crack edge. And so you can see from this kind of in a sense, simplified version of the problem that we have a tough problem to solve. You know, it is on one hand, we have the non-locality from elasticity. So if you change the pressure at one point, you are changing instantaneously in the quasi-static sense the opening at another point. We have this strong non-linearity coming from the lubrication equation, and then we have two moving fronts. Yeah, so maybe so, and then I should say that at the fluid front we have a Stefan problem, and at the crack edge we have, as you can see from here, we have asymptotics for the opening, and this K is actually the toughness. It's a measure of the energy which is dissipated in the rock to break the rock, and this is coming from linear elastic fracture mechanics, not this asymptotics on the opening. Now, the question is that when we look at that, and that is if I go back to 30 years ago, and especially within the context of the petroleum engineering, then the focus was at that stage on constructing the global solution, but not really looking at the detail of what's happening near the tip. And first of all, let me say that in general, and that has been proven since, that in view of the large stress that and the deep fracture that we are dealing with, that we can consider the two from the fluid front and the crack edge to have coalesce. So that means that we are losing, in a sense, one boundary condition, but we are gaining something else. And then it's obviously for fluid mechanician, the fact that we have a channel that goes to zero, and then we're injecting a fluid which has viscosity, that must lead to some kind of pressure singularity. So now those issues were not really treated within the petroleum engineering community. As I say, that there was people were concentrating on solving the problem here, and somehow putting under the rug the issue of what was happening near the tip of the fracture. And a very simple pragmatic question is that if you want to construct a numerical code, I mean, what is the velocity? How do you calculate the velocity of the crack at the crack edge so that you can evolve the fracture? And so that leads to this work that was done in the late 80s, early 90s in Cambridge. And as I said, I mean, Anthony played absolutely a key role in that, because he was the person pushing for a correct formulation of the problem. And here that leads, and I will give a little bit of story behind it, that led to this paper that was published in '94 with all the people involved in this research at the time. That was mostly from Schlumberger Cambridge research, as it was, I mean, that's the name I'm still using nowadays, and Alex Cheng, who was on sabbatical from the University of Delaware. And that led to another asymptote where the opening varying from as the distance from the tip to a 2/3, and not to the 1/2 like that kind of sacrosanct asymptote in linear elastic fraction mechanics. So the work was going on, and I must say that we're kind of fumbling, not really moving along, and simply the problem is complicated. Even if we look at the simple geometry, the problem is formulated in terms of a nonlinear integral differential set of equations. It's time dependent, so it's not really easy to see how to solve it, no, and especially to analyze from a mathematical point of view. And I think that the breakthrough in how to move came actually from Anthony. One day I still remember that we were at SCR in one of the conference rooms where all of us involved in this research. And Anthony came to this idea, why don't we formulate the tip as an autonomous solution, looking at it from a constant velocity point of view. And that was really, I mean, today it looks so obvious, but none of us thought about it at the time. It was really Anthony who came with this idea. So at that time, things really start to unravel. Alex Cheng was there. He started to construct a numerical solution, assuming like a semi-infinite. That's what we were looking at, the autonomous solution. We were looking at the semi-infinite tip solution. And there was some hints from numerics that, yeah, indeed, it was not the 1/2, it was a different power. And then around March, I think 1992, I think if my memory is correct, we had the visit of Jim Rice. We present the work that was going on at that stage. And that was on a Friday. And then on the Monday, some of us came together and said, okay, now this may be a simple solution. So as I will show it, is a 2-line derivation to come up with this new asymptote. But a couple of days later, a letter came from Jim Rice, coming with the same solution, actually a very elegant solution using complex variable. And fortunately, we had at that time written a short report with that solution. So Anthony could write back to Jim and saying that, no, I mean, thank you very much, it's great, but no, we have also obtained that solution. And of course, when you think that we invent something, there's always somebody else who has done before. And that was Spence and Sharp, in 1985 from Imperial College. It was actually hidden in one of the appendix of the paper, and John Lister in the context of Dike. I mean, what we did was a bit different. It was, of course, also 2/3, but what we did was, I mean, and that was through Anthony's insight, that this guy's autonomous. So basically, it was a solution that could be grafted it was universal and could be grafted to numerical code. That was really, I think, the key idea there. Okay. Let me just, in a couple of minutes, to tell you how simple it is in a sense. No? So we start from the continuity equation, which is the only equation which has time in a sense in it. No? You rewrite the continuity equation in the moving coordinate system, and then you realize that if you can see my cursor here, that if the aperture is a power law of the distance, and if the power law index is less than 1, then as you're approaching the tip, the advective term becomes dominant, so you can drop the time derivative in the moving coordinate system. And so you end up with this equation here, which is the continuity equation, in the limit when you approach the tip, which you can integrate, and you get actually this very simple expression for the continuity equation, assuming that it's an impermeable, so there's no leak off. I will look at that later on. So you take this equation, you combine that with the elasticity Eigen solution, which is something which is well known. It's in textbook, where you have again, it's a set of Eigen solution, and the LEFM solution is a particular one, which corresponds to the 1/2, and that corresponds to P, the pressure. I should have said that the P is the pressure equal to 0. So it's actually, you have a whole family of Eigen solution. You combine that with Poiseuille law and the continuity equation, and you get this kind of reduced Reynolds equation. So it is really those two equations that you just have to combine. You are looking at what is the solution that satisfies both elasticity and lubrication, and all and behold, you get the 2/3 with the prefactor. So it's actually an incredibly simple solution, and you wonder why it took so long to derive it. But anyway, that was what was in this paper, and also in the that I mentioned, that was actually published as from this group of people that was called at that time the SCR geomechanics group. The next step was done by Brian Lennox, who was also part of that group, who generalized the solution taking into account what is called in our field the Carter's leak-off. It is simply that the leak-off is inversely proportional to the square root of the exposure time, which is here. Then when you translate that into a moving coordinate, then you have a square root singularity for the leak-off. You combine that, this is the more general continuity equation, and you say that, okay, you have 3 terms, and you drop the storage term, saying that the balance, you balance the leak-off with this term here, and that's what you get here. So now the continuity equation is not as before Q equal VW, but Q in this other limit, Q is being proportional to the square root of S. And then you combine that, as I've shown before, you combine that with the Poiseuille law and elasticity, then you get a 5/8 exponent, which is actually very close to 2/3. So what I want to stress here is that that was at that stage, I mean, clear is that no, here we construct two solutions that actually assume that is zero toughness, because you can show that if the exponent is larger than 1/2, then you have no zero energy, critical energy release rate. There is no dissipation in the solid. All the dissipation is in the fluid. And so that was the story at the end of, by the end of 1995, so 25 years ago. So we had somehow kind of 3 different solutions. I mean, the all power law, you can see that, and the class, the sacrosanct from fractional mechanics, which is the 1/2, the 2/3, and then the 5/8, which takes into account leak-off. And so that was a story. And then I would say that the center of gravity of that research moved to the University of Minnesota with a group of very talented former students of mine, a talented group of students who really kind of establish the link between those 3 solutions that seem to be quite disparate. And so Dimitri Garagaj, José Adachi, and Andy Bunger, and the contribution of Andy Bunger, as you will see, is actually from experimental verification of the asymptotes. So let me focus on the impermeable case. Now we are looking at a situation where with both viscosity and toughness. So we call that the storage edge. You will see that now those kind of diagram that I'm going to produce as some kind of a phase diagram, and kind of conceptually depict the solution. And so when you, so now what you have when you introduce both viscosity and toughness, that suddenly you have a length scale. Before that, you didn't have a length scale, you had similarity solution. And you have length scale for the distance, you have length scale for the aperture. And you have to find out when you analyze the equation that near the tip, you have actually the 1/2 asymptote, the classical one from LEFM, but far from the tip, you have the 2/3, the SCR asymptote, as it was called there. And just a little story, the work was sponsored by Schlumberger at the time. And so the red was supposed to be the Halliburton red, and the blue was supposed to be the Schlumberger blue. At that time, I had a student who looked at the right Pantone number for those colors. So it was the correct color, actually. Not anymore, I don't remember those things. Okay, so, but the important thing was that, you have this length scale LMK, and the solution, you can see the expression here, you have the toughness, the elasticity, the viscosity, but it's inversely proportional to the square of the velocity, okay? So what this solution, and when you and that was constructed by Dimitri Garag as part of his PhD thesis, is that you construct the full solution. You have to do it numerically, but you find that at distance about beyond LMK, then you see the viscous asymptotes, and see this is in this kind of scale form, in the kind of omega, it is the aperture, and psi is the distance from the tip. You see the complete solution. You can see over many decades, near the tip, the 1/2, and far from the tip, the 2/3. No, it does not look very exciting when you look at that from in a log plot, because it is very smooth function, but when you implement that in a code, and you look at what the effect it does on the solution, is actually absolutely major, even though that doesn't look like that. Let me just say a few words about the work of Andy Bunger, who did his PhD graduated 15 years ago. He did part of his PhD in CSIRO in Melbourne, so they had all the experimental facilities. And what he did was to inject fluid into transparent material, either glass of PMMA, and either glycerine or glucose solution. And basically, it was a dye fluid. It was transparent, so he can using photometric technique, he can measure the aperture of the fracture. And so you can see here some of the picture of the setup here, and kind of a Peniche fracture being generated by injection of fluid. And what he obtained, though, and he had to do many experiments, because you can see that you have many orders of magnitude, so you have to change, going from PMMA to glass, and then you go to a stiffer material, or you go from glycerin to glucose to change the viscosity. Well, you obtain here at the point, so that the line here, the theoretical solution with the 1/2 and the 2/3 asymptote, and you see the dots here, which are measured, and I mean, convincingly, I mean, you can see that you match the theoretical curve. But even more interesting, if you look at those two cases here is the aperture profile near the tip in this regime here, and you can see that it tracks the 1/2, the K asymptote is the 1/2 asymptote. Not only tracks it, but it also, both in terms of the exponent, but also in terms of the prefactor. I think that's important, because everything was measured like toughness. And here you see the case where we are in a situation where we are dominated by viscosity, and you can see here again the data point tracking the viscosity solution, the 2/3. can see here that inside the box here, you have the ratio of this tip distance, this LMK, which tells us where you are in the tip asymptote compared to the radius of the fracture. You can see a very large number here. So it means that you are, as I will explain a bit further, you are in this toughness dominated regime. And here you are in the viscosity dominated regime. So that's what that was the storage case. Then I'm not going to go in detail. Just say that then the work continues, start to complete. So that was the work that I just mentioned. Jose Adachi construct this edge, assuming so zero viscosity, but including leak-off, but the leak-off was not kind of infinite. Constructing that solution, it brings another length scale, this kind of L, M, M tilde. So M is for the viscosity, the mu is the tilde means that it's leak-off. And so we get another length scale. And then at the end, putting all together, that was the work of several people, but at the end is constructing the whole solution. You see this phase diagram, and the key there is to realize that if you are on what we call the storage edge, where there's no leak-off, you have one length scale, which is this LMK. Here, when you have leak-off and no toughness, you have another length scale. And in general, so this problem is characterized by two length scale. And if you take the ratio of those two length scale, you get a number chi, which is expressed here. So what does that mean? It means that, okay, those are the parameters that control the solution. So let's say equal chi equal 10 minus 2. The x-axis is the distance from the tip. And so you can see that in that case, when you first have the k vertex, the 1/2, you go further away, but on the log scale, and you get the m vertex, which is the viscosity one. If not, you increase the leak-off so that you are somewhere here, then what you see is another asymptote, an intermediate asymptote showing up. And so you have a very complex structure where you have the 1/2 near the tip. In the middle, you have the 5/8, and far away you have the 1/3, and that the 2/3, and that really is the tip, is what is constructing, what's happening at the tip. Now the question is that what does the finite fracture sees? No, well, it's a comparison of length scale, and as I will show. So we start then to look at simple problem and the Griffith crack 2-dimensional, but the most interesting one is really the 3D, the Peniche fracture, which is depicted here. And you can directly imagine two limiting cases: one where there's no toughness, it's all viscosity. You are kind of reopening a pre-existing discontinuity by injecting fluid, and then you get this kind of 2/3 asymptote. And another case where you have toughness, but the fluid is inviscid or negligible viscosity. In that case, you have uniform pressure. Well, it turns out that everything is dictated by what's happening near the tip. And in general, if you have the two, you have viscosity and toughness, what you find that as time evolves, then the nature of the solution seen by this finite fracture is changing. And you can see that by looking at this expression for LMK that I've shown before, you can see here's 1/v, v being the tip velocity, 1/v squared. So if you're injecting fluid at the constant rate, and as the fracture is growing, well, the edge, by simply because of divergence, geometric divergence, the velocity of the tip is going to slow down. If the velocity of the tip is going to slow down, then this LMK increases. No? And so you have two cases in a sense that at very, very small time, where V is very large, this LMK is small compared to the radius of the fracture, and then you are dominated by viscosity, and as time goes on, then the tip is slowing down and the viscosity kicks in. Okay, so that is kind of the general idea. So now you can actually, in case like that, in simple case, and it's only for Griffith crack and Peniche, you can this comparison. We construct a solution, and I'm arguing that the small time is viscosity, the large time is toughness. it is done via comparison of length scale. But actually, for this simple geometric shape, no, you can actually translate that into comparing time to a characteristic time. And so that is the TMK here. So that is a time scale that emerges from the solution. So if you have no toughness, you are here. You have what we call the M vertex. It is a similarity solution. It is characterized by a scale for the length, for the opening, for the pressure that varies like as a power law of time. And similarly, when you're in the toughness dominated case where you have no viscosity, you have again another simple, actually it was derived by Snedden, but not in the context of hydraulic fracture, where you have another similarity solution. And so to go from one to the other, you have time scale. So if the time is small or large compared to that time scale, you're in viscosity or in toughness dominated regime. So this is quite important because if you want to do an experiment, as Andy Bunger did with his PhD, which is reflects what is happening in the field, well, you have to calculate this time scale. If you want to be in the viscosity dominated regime, you have to design an experiment which is such that the time, the treatment time, so to speak, or the lab time is much smaller than the characteristic time of that process. And that was generalized. Again, various people contribute to that, to the case of leak-off. This is kind of this phase diagram that we construct. And the thing to remember here is that now in the tip we have two length scale, and so we devise some kind of a trajectory parameter, which was the ratio of times of length scale. But here, because of the Peniche shape, and we can think in terms of time, which is more convenient, we have two time scale. One is characterizing the evolution from a viscous dissipation to K, which is dissipation in the solid. No, so we have that what time scale is telling us, and then we have another time scale which tells us how we are evolving from a case where the fluid is stored. We have hardly any leak-off to a situation of very low efficiency where most of the fluid is going into leak-off. So you have those two time scale. You can take the ratio of that and you have a trajectory parameter. The end story here is that when we restrict our consideration to Peniche shape, then I would call it the birth of the fracture is here, the M vertex. It is storage dominated, it is viscosity dominated. As time goes on, leak-off kicks in, so you depart from the storage edge and you go towards a toughness here, and we go to that is in a sense the death of the fracture. So when you are in toughness dominated and leak-off dominated, and depending on this ratio of time scale, well, you have different trajectory. In particular, you can see that we can go from M to K tilde using this path, which goes through that M tilde vertex, which is leak-off dominated, or we could go, which now becomes, this solution now becomes a time intermediate asymptote. Or you have another path which is like that, which go along the storage edge and then the toughness edge, and then this K vertex becomes now intermediate time asymptotics. Okay, so that's the kind of story, and then you have all those vertex are similarity solution, and you can see the scale here. Okay, so that's I'm nearly done. Here, Simon, I can see my watch here. So am I overdue? I can stop here, or I can just show 2 slides.
Oh, please go ahead and show 2 slides.
Yes. Okay. I just want to finish by saying, okay, how do we implement those ideas in a numerical code? And that's the work from Anthony Pearson, my colleague at UBC, and you can see here that we put dedicates to Anthony, to recognize. I mean, that paper was written about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, but we recognize the role that he played. The idea is very simple: is to simply recognize that we have two type of elements. Now we have the channel, which is kind of a regular solution, and the red here are tip, and the solution the tip is based on the asymptote. The whole idea behind it is say that we have a computation length scale, which is of course the size of the grid. And the question is that what at that scale, how does the asymptote looks like? Is that going to be toughness or viscosity or anything in between? So that is the key idea behind. So using then the solution in the neighborhood of the tip, so you have the fringe of tip element. We can then we're inverting the asymptote. We use the fast matching method to solve the Eigen equation. So it's a level set method, and then we can calculate what is the solution near the tip, and in a weak form, assigning the volume of fluid in that element according to the asymptote. So that's in a nutshell what it is. You can see, just look at the picture. I'm not going to comment them, but the idea is that even using a very, very coarse grid, we can capture the solution. And this algorithm automatically takes into account the changing nature of the asymptote. Let me pass the movie. That was from my colleague, but I just want to close it. I wrote a paper about 15 years ago, and that you can see the part of the acknowledgement here, which I just want to read at least the last sentence, because it really echoes what has been said by Simon and Paul, and just saying that this keen interest in the development of junior scientists, his intellectual rigor, his enthusiasm for new results, and also his tempestuous contempt for research not up to his high standard will always be fondly remembered. Anthony, thank you so much. You had a great role in my career as a scientist. I'm grateful forever. Thank you so much, and happy birthday. I wish you many, many good years ahead. Bye-bye.
Emmanuel, terrific. Thank you so much. That was really excellent. I don't know if we have anybody who wants to ask some questions about that. We have a very peaceful audience today in terms of questions. We'll let Anthony ask a pile of questions later, perhaps. So, Emmanuel, I think in the spirit of Paul Hammond's title of his talk, I might say that I think you've cracked a deceptively tough problem there. So thank you very much for an excellent talk.